Hello and welcome to this very special Tuesday edition of the Slate. Why is it so special? You might ask. Well, Brendan Glasheen is not here, so I'm filling in. It's Gary and Thorne. We are talking some baseball today, and we've got two of my favorite gentlemen to talk baseball with. The Matts, Matt LaMarca, Matt Meiselman. Guys, how are you doing on this lovely Tuesday?
I'm doing pretty good. Ready to break down some old pitchers. I think that's going to be a lot of what we talk about today, but also some good pitchers, some of whom may be old. We've got Justin Verlander versus Dylan Cease. I'm excited for that matchup. Maybe not for the expected reasons, but we'll get into it for sure.
Yeah, I'm wonderful. The Mets just called up one of their top prospects. Always makes me happy. Unfortunately, the reason is because some of our players are dropping like flies, which doesn't make me happy, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Carlos Carrasco, not officially on the IL as of yet, but going to be very soon. Ke'Bryan Hayes on the IL as of today. We've got some guys missing from lineups tonight. We know already DJ LeMahieu, Josh Naylor, among many, many others. Make sure to download the DK Live app if you want to keep up to date with all of that. But we've got some other news to get to before we start really diving into this 13-game featured slate on DraftKings tonight. We will also obviously hit up some of our favorite sportsbook plays as well for tonight's baseball slate. But we got to go back to tomorrow before we can talk about tonight. Walker Buehler was the big news yesterday. Not only did we learn, what date the World Series would be played, we learned that Walker Buehler will not be playing in those games, even if the Los Angeles Dodgers are. He's going to miss the remainder of the season. And it's starting to, I don't want to say shaky, guys, but there's a lot of concern with this Dodgers rotation, whether it now be it's definitely going to be missing Walker Buehler, or the fact that, you've got Clayton Kershaw on the IL right now. Obviously, this is not the version of the Dodgers rotation that we thought we would be getting at this point of the season. They're the runaway favorites to win the World Series. Meiselman, how do you kind of track what the Dodgers are doing right now?
I think the NL East is the value bet to win the World. I think the Soto trade, but now without Tatis, they're a bit overvalued. And that means the Mets are slightly undervalued. I don't think the market is quite taking into account how good DeGrom is. Like, his return should have moved the odds more. And then I think the Braves are just generally like better than people realize. And so are the Phillies. The Phillies, I think, are the most underrated team in baseball. Kyle Schwarber's going to be back this week. Bryce Harper might be back in a couple of weeks. That team's really dangerous in the playoffs. So yeah, this is how I'm looking at it. I think you can bet all the teams individually. The Phillies are my personal favorite, but this is still what I'm looking at. I know it's the exact same commentary I gave yesterday, but I just don't think anything's changed.
LaMarca, you are a connoisseur of National League East baseball. Yes, obviously some talented teams in that division, but are we sort of, I don't want to say overreacting to a very good pitcher no longer pitching this season, because I think there is just reaction here, but we are also talking about a team that is virtually guaranteed a first round bye in the playoffs. Maybe is there a little bit of smoke but no fire here with the Dodgers?
Yeah, I have zero concerns about the Dodgers. Walker Buehler's a good pitcher. I do not put him in like that ace pitcher category. I think that a lot of his, more advanced metrics kind of support that argument that he's just a solid arm. And the Dodgers are already the best pitching staff in baseball in terms of team ERA. And they are going to get back their stud pitching prospect who has yet to throw an inning this season.
Oh, Dustin May. Dustin May will be back on the 20th, I believe.
Right. So I think that if anything, the Dodgers, I'm not going to say they're going to be better without Walker Buehler, but they're still going to be improving, right? They've thrown a lot of innings this season between Mitch White and Ryan Pepiot, and adding in Dustin May is going to make a difference. So they still have Julio Urias. They still have Tony Gonsolin. Like they're getting results, even though it might not have been the pitchers that we expected it to be at the beginning of the year. The results have been there, so I'm not overly worried about the Dodgers pitching staff.
Yeah, Tyler Anderson has kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but he was an all-star, obviously. It seems like the Dodgers do just sort of have their pitching factory out there. Let's go from one coast to the other and talk about, well, at one point, the overwhelming favorite in the American League to win the World Series, that was the New York Yankees. They're 2-10 in the else aside from the Orioles has really played all that well. So the Yankees still with a double-digit lead in the division. Is this just a classic case of at some point they had to lose a couple of games, or is there actually something to be worried about here, Meiselman? Or I think we might have lost Meiselman. So Lamarca
I'll jump is not there. Matt Carpenter is not there. Their bullpen has sustained some injuries, and even guys like Clay Holmes, who was so lights out for them in the first half, he's kind of taken a step backwards. So I do think there are some more red flags for sure, but I'm not overly worried about the Yankees at this point. I'd feel better about the team if it seemed like Brian Cashman was a little bit more willing to call up some of their top prospects. You know, they have this heralded farm system that, you know, apparently none of these players are available to be traded because they're so good, but we also can't see any of them in the major leagues until they turn like 27 years old. So, you know, Clark Schmidt just pitched 6 perfect innings, I want to say, last week and had 11 strikeouts. So I think they have, for sure, given the lead that they have, it's hard to imagine them, you know, relinquishing even anything like a bye, right? They might not finish with the best record in the conference. That might end up going to Houston, but I still think the Yankees are looking at a first round bye in the playoffs, and that's going to make them a scary team.
Yeah, they're in an interesting spot. I mean, as you mentioned, they've got some injury issues right now. There doesn't seem like any of them are set to carry over into the playoffs. I think even Matt Carpenter, which seemed really bleak at the time of the injury, he's said he will be seen again this season in pinstripes. So Luis Severino expected to maybe get 4 or 5 starts in September to kind of get ready for the playoffs. So there are some things that could course correct here. And as you talk about, there are also avenues, whether that be a Peraza or a Volpe, to maybe fix a hole in their lineup, which has been IKF at shortstop so far this season. I think we've got Meiselman back. Matt, want to ask you about the futures here with the American League in particular. It's a really strange dynamic we have in the American League right now, with a lot of mediocrity in the middle of the American League right now. Is there any team worth believing in and trusting in with a future here? I think we're still having a bit of trouble picking up Meiselman here, so we're going to try to keep figuring that out. In the meantime, let's move on to the topic Lamarca has been waiting to talk about, which is some prospect news. Everyone loves prospect news in August. Started the floodgates, let's say, opened this afternoon when the Athletics announced they would call up top prospect Shea Langoliers. Obviously in their system, acquired in the Matt Olson deal from the Braves. You're also getting Brett Beatty. Sorry for some feedback here. If anyone's
a little reverb.
I
think we're better. I think
we're okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Matt, talk about Brett Beatty.
Brett Brady, very promising position prospect for the Mets in the most recent of the MLB.com prospect reports. He checked in as a top 20 overall guy. Legit hit tool. He's kind of like an all fields hitter, which is rare for somebody who's still just 22. Has tremendous raw power as well. Hasn't necessarily gotten to it a ton in games because he still has to change his hitting profile a little bit. He's hitting a few too many ground balls, which you don't want to see out of a guy with, 70 raw power, but he's crushed every level of the minor leagues. The Mets have injuries in the infield, and with the aspirations that this team has, I think it's a great time to give him a look, give him some extended at bats at the major league level, and see if he can help the team.
I would agree. And obviously Beatty, a name that, even sports card enthusiasts have been talking about for quite some time. So it'll be exciting to possibly see him in the lineup tomorrow for the Mets. Before we make the full-on transition to tonight's slate, let's talk about probably the best game on tonight's slate. You've got the Astros going up against the White Sox. Obviously, in general, the White Sox have been very underwhelming so far in 2022. They've got people in the front row managing the team, which says all you need to know about Tony La Russa. But this is an amazing pitching matchup. You got Justin Verlander going up against Dylan Cease. right now, far and away, the two leading candidates for the American League Cy Young on the DraftKings Sportsbook. I believe we've got Cease at plus 165. At least that's what he was at this afternoon. I remember betting Dylan Cease at the All-Star break at plus 900, which I feel very, very good about right now. As you see it, Matt, what's sort of the breakdown here? What's the path to Dylan Cease sort of surpassing Justin Verlander in the AL Cy Young race? Is it as simple as winning this game tonight?
No. I think Verlander, I honestly think Verlander deserves to be a bigger favorite at this point.
Okay.
The numbers in general, you can make a case that they're pretty close. I mean, Cease from a strikeout perspective has been much better than Verlander this season, but just the narrative, I think, is really going to help JV here. Obviously he's got the 1.85 ERA, but he also is coming off of a major arm injury and is pitching for the team with the best record in the American League. And that kind of stuff matters to voters. I know that in recent years, we've seen guys on some lesser teams start to get some love in the Cy Young voting. I mean, Jacob deGrom won a Cy Young, having like basically a 500 record for a losing team. But I just think that the way Verlander has pitched and his reputation, all that stuff is going to help him out. So I think the real answer is, for what does Dylan Cease need to do, is he needs Justin Verlander to miss some starts.
Yeah. I mean, that was really the recipe for success for Robbie Ray last season. For as much as he pitched well down the stretch, it was Garrett Cole missing a couple starts for the Yankees and really seeing some of those counting stats go down in direct comparison with Robbie Ray. I mean, look, even as a Cease bettor, I think his season is just so interesting in the sense that it really comes down to how much impact should an official scorer have on someone's American League Cy Young candidacy, because obviously we have these amazing statistics with Cease, 1 earned run or fewer in 19 of his 23 starts so far this season. But there was that stretch in July and June where he was allowing a couple runs per game, but it was, I believe, 10 consecutive unearned runs across 4 starts, something crazy like that. I mean, yes, the White Sox defense has been horrendous this season, but a couple of those official scorings go the other way, and you're looking at someone whose ERA is in the mid-2s. So I think it's going to take a pretty amazing run from Dylan Cease down the stretch. Although I will say, one of the reasons I liked betting him at his number at the All-Star break, the White Sox have an incredibly easy schedule down the stretch, and he's already taken advantage of that since the All-Star break, beating up on the likes of, the Royals and the Guardians and lesser offenses like that. So he will have the opportunity to put up some good numbers, but I'm with you. The narrative is overwhelmingly in the direction of Justin Verlander. So it's going to take quite an amazing stretch of pitching, I think, for Cease to catch up all the way. Okay, let's move to tonight's 13-game slate. It's a big, big slate. And if you didn't realize just from that premier pitching matchup we've talked about, the starting pitching on this slate is exceptionally top heavy. I would even say anyone priced over 8K deserves some serious consideration, whether it be on their own merit or because of a very advantageous matchup. Maybe aside from Verlander or Cease, unless you really feel strongly about one of those two guys, Matt, is there a name that's kind of floating to the top of your list?
I do think Cease is very interesting tonight. Really both of the pitchers in those games, right? Because we've talked about how they are the two premier pitchers in the American League right now. And if you look at the fantasy points per start, they're pretty head and shoulders above everybody else who's going to get the ball. But because they're going against each other and it's reducing the win equity for both players, I think both guys will kind of be a little bit more under the radar tonight. I think that Robbie Ray, who is taking on a dreadful Angels offense, is going to check in with the highest ownership. And at 9,500, that's probably deserved, right? He's been pitching pretty well. Last 10 games, he's averaging over 21 DraftKings points. And again, it doesn't get much better from a matchup perspective. And I also think Nestor Cortez has a chance to be a little bit more popular than Verlander and Cease. So if you're thinking, from a game theory perspective, I like the idea of going with one of these two just superstar pitchers, preferably Cease, just because he has a little bit more strikeout upside. But both guys, I think, are going to come in with less ownership than they should.
How cute would you maybe be willing to get with someone like Nick Pavetta, who is in a fantastic matchup tonight against the Pirates? Again, we found out earlier that Ke'Bryan Hayes now on the injured list, so he will not be in the lineup, basically giving them two actual major league talent bats in Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz. And obviously O'Neal Cruz, someone who hits the ball really hard and is impressive, but still strikes out about 40% of the time. Pavetta's had a really up and down season. Recently, it's been more down than up, but at $8,000 in a great pitcher's park, do you think he's someone who's going to be relatively popular tonight, or maybe could he slip through the cracks?
I think he'll carry some ownership, not a ton, just because he really hasn't been very good, especially of late. I'd actually recommended the Pirates today as one of my wagers for my best bets article that you can find over on DraftKings Nation. So I think the Pirates a little bit sneaky in this spot.
Sure.
I'm not playing them offensively. Like, I'm not stacking the Pirates, but it does give me just a smidge of concern about Pavetta. And would it shock me if he came out and dominated Pittsburgh? A little bit, I guess. I don't think dominating is a strong word, but yeah, I don't know. He's not somebody that really piqued my interest today.
No, that's fair. I would say more often than not, I am also not someone who has my interest piqued by Nick Pavetta. I think we're going to try to get Meiselman back in here. Matt, are you good to go?
Am I? You tell me.
You sound good. Hey, we got you back.
All right.
I know you really wanted to talk about Cease Verlander, so I'm going to clear the runway and just let you take off here.
Yes, I'm going to avoid talking much about Patrick Corbin. I don't think he's that important, honestly. Let's just leave that alone. I actually really like the over in the Astros-White Sox game. It might be my favorite bet today because I think Cease and Verlander have been two of the luckiest pitchers in all of the MLB this year, just in terms of what their ERA is compared to their underlying numbers. Like, both of these guys deserve to have ERAs in the low threes, and they're both in the high ones. And because of that, I think that everything is just priced down. I also think it's been bet down because, this is a matchup where people want to root for pitching. It's the Cy Young, the two favorites for the Cy Young, and I think they are justifiably the top two. But I think the whole top of the board in the AL has been fairly lucky this year, McClanahan included. He's never been this good before. So the Astros have a really good offense. The White Sox have a fine offense. But this is a hitter's park, so we're getting a park upgrade for Houston, and these are fly ball pitchers. So I think there's actually a lot of potential for run scoring here. I don't actually think you can really even consider Cease for DFS tonight. I don't think the upside is there against an Astros lineup that doesn't strike out much. So I'm not sure what you guys have already said, whether you agree with me on these guys or you're taking the total opposite approach. But I think Verlander is a fine option for fantasy. I don't think I would touch Dylan Cease. I think he's too expensive. And then my favorite bet for this game is actually the over, even though I do think these guys, one of them is going to win the Cy Young.
So we should say from a lineup perspective in this game, especially if you are someone who is intrigued by the over, Luis Robert remains out. He is not in the lineup for the White Sox tonight. Trey Mancini, as he often has been since being traded to the Astros, also not in the lineup for the Astros tonight, though they will get Jeremy Pena back into the lineup.
And Jose Altuve, who also didn't play last night, which I
Altuve's
liked the over last night too, up until we got the lineup. And then it was like, this lineup is just bad.
Yeah, you want to see Jose Altuve in there. That's for sure. You mentioned sort of liking Verlander, not really liking Cease on tonight's slate. Is there a pitcher you're sort of zeroing in on from a DFS perspective? Yeah,
so Lamarca's going to hate this one, but my favorite pitcher by far tonight is Charlie Morton. I don't think too many people are playing Morton, but do the Mets not realize that Morton is a massive reverse splits pitcher? They're just running out lefties like he's any old righty. And Morton, throughout his career, is better against lefties. He strikes out more guys when they're left-handed. This year, he's been more neutral. Last year was very extreme. He was way better against lefties. But overall, also, like, this is not a great version of the Mets lineup with Michael Perez playing catcher and Devin Marrero in the lineup. And then they've got Naquin and Vogelbach, who are left-handed. McNeil's not a super high strikeout guy, but Morton is, he's better than an $8,500 pitcher on average. And I actually don't think this is a bad matchup for him. Like, the Mets top four is good. Vogelbach, I'm not sure, right? Like, how good is this guy really? Like, he's an above average hitter, but
He's a folk hero.
yeah. And he's overperforming is another way to say that, I guess. I think he's fine, but the bottom part of the Mets lineup tonight is really bad. So I think this matchup sets up well for Morton. And I think because of the big names on the slate, I'm sure you guys, if you haven't, like Robbie Ray is whatever, like really, really good spot. So he's worth mentioning, even if you already mentioned him. But I think a lot of people are going to play Ray. I think Nestor Cortez is in a good spot. Cease and Berlander are going to get some attention. And I think Morton just goes way overlooked. So he's by far my favorite pitcher tonight. And honestly, like, I think you can just play him with an Astros stack and be really, really contrarian with that combo.
I did also want to ask you guys quickly about Justin Steele, because I think on a regular slate with sort of your average crop of pitchers, he would be someone who I would expect to carry a heavy amount of attention tonight. I think we can agree he's underpriced at $6,200, especially considering not just his recent stats, but his season-long stats. I mean, this is someone who has a 3.28 FIP across 21 starts. I believe a strikeout rate per 9 above 11 in his last 7 appearances. Like, he does not fit the archetype of a 6K pitcher. He dominated the team he is facing tonight in his last start. Is this going to be a situation where so many people are intoxicated by the top end of this pitching pricing list that I don't want to say people will forget about Justin Steele? That's kind of like undermining people's intelligence, but this is a very, very strong pitching slate. So, Lamarca, do you think Steele is going to be someone who's kind of hovering in that like 10 to 15% ownership range, or is that even too high?
Yeah, I have him projected for about 15% ownership. Should put him right in sort of like the next tier down behind the Robbie Rays and the Nestor Cortezes of the world. But it's hard to argue against him at 6,200 in this matchup, right? Justin Steele is somebody I've been kind of enamored with all year because he has really good StatCast data. He's in the 86th percentile in average exit velocity and hard hit rate, 94th percentile in barrel rate. So he has excelled at limiting contact all year. And as you mentioned, the strikeout rate recently has been way up. 19 whiffs in his last 2 games over 10 2/3 innings. If you're going to miss bats at that level and limit the damage on balls in play and face the Washington Nationals and your $6,200, what can I say? You know, like, it's hard to argue that guy.
Matt, do you have any Steele takes? You want to move this thing along to offense?
Just very quickly, I don't think he'll be super popular. Part of it is Sonny Gray is also cheap. And then Zach Plesac just had maybe his best start of the year against the Tigers. He's facing the Tigers again. He's only 7,200. So aside from Robbie Ray, I think pitching ownership just gets really spread out tonight. And I think Steele is a fine choice, but I mean, is he really this good of a strikeout pitcher? Like, I think he is underpriced. He should be in the 7,000s, maybe 8,000, but there are a handful of pitchers tonight who are also underpriced. So yes, I think he should be more expensive, but I think you could say that about like 6 other guys. So I think he's a good play. I just think there's a lot of good plays, and yeah, Sonny Gray is certainly one of them. Like, he's not the best pitcher, but he's 8,700 for a really, really good home matchup against the Royals, who strike out a lot more now that they don't have Whit Merrifield. Salvador Perez being in the lineup actually may help him in terms of strikeouts. So yeah, there's just a lot of good pitching choices tonight. I think Steele's fine, but I think you go with a lot of different guys.
Should say too, Washington, one of the teams that was towards the bottom, maybe even at the very bottom of strikeout rate for most of the season, despite their offensive struggles. But like you were mentioning, Matt, with the Royals, you lose Juan Soto, you lose Josh Bell. Suddenly that strikeout rate jumps pretty high up the list. And they've been striking out a lot since the All-Star
break. And Keibert Ruiz is one of their low strikeout guys too. He's not in the lineup tonight. Yeah. You're going with Barrera. So yeah, that should definitely help Steele also.
So let's kind of motor through offense quickly here. Do you guys have a favorite stack? Maybe even if you want to give me your obvious stack and then the one you're a little bit more proud of. I know, Meisman, we already talked about the Astros. So maybe do you have a different one than that, or do you just want to dive a little bit deeper into that one?
Yeah, I think the Yankees are fine to stack. It's just, there's a whole bunch of stacks. This is sort of similar to last night. You've got like Toronto in a good spot against the Orioles, the Yankees in a good spot against the Rays. I think even Atlanta at home against Taijuan Walker, like all of these teams are going to be relatively popular. So I don't feel great about any of them just because ownership won't be that low. It's really like, it's the Astros. I think if Cease is bad early, the middle of the White Sox bullpen can give up some runs. And it's also a park upgrade for Houston where like you can get some home run upside out of them. And I mean, I think Cease most likely will have a good game, but if he doesn't, it can turn into a big night for Houston. So I think, yeah, that's the contrarian stack for sure.
That's contrarian, all right.
Well, LaMarco, what direction are you kind of headed in tonight?
I'm going a little bit more on the board. I still think they'll be undervalued, but I like the Cardinals against Kyle Freeland. They're a team that just smashes left-handed pitching, and it makes a ton of sense when you look at their lineup, right? Paul Goldschmidt, elite against left-handers. Nolan Arenado, elite against left-handers. Even Albert Pujols' corpse is like a 140 WRC plus against left-handed pitcher this year. So, and Kyle Freeland, not very good. I think that the Cardinals are kind of my contrarian stack. Obviously, the Cubs are going to be the big target for most people. They're taking on Patrick Corbin, who undoubtedly does not belong in the major leagues anymore. I'm shocked the Nationals are still rolling him out there every 5 days. Like, you would think that they have someone in the minor leagues that they could give a start. Maybe make a fan promotion, win a start instead of Patrick Corbin. But
Can
I don't
ask
know.
You guys just quickly, what do you think Patrick Corbin's true talent ERA is? He's actually over 7.
6.
Yeah,
I
think
say
he's
mid-5s easy. Yeah,
I think he's like 5 flat is really what he is. Like, if you look at most of his numbers, they're bad, but they're similar to what he was the last couple of years when he had ERAs around like 5.3 and 4.6. And like, there's nothing different about him now. It's just, he's not getting out of any jams. And there's a 384, I think is the number, BABIP against him. He's been very, very, very unlucky. And he's also had some brutal matchups recently, like the Phillies and the Mets and the Dodgers. Like, he's faced some really tough teams. So like, he's bad. I agree he's bad, but he's not that bad. He should be able to be like a number 5 starter going forward.
I guess the weird thing with some of the ERA estimators is once you get to the extreme ends of the spectrum, I mean, this even goes back to what you were talking about with Dylan Cease and Justin Verlander, aside from very odd Kevin Gausman FIP of 2022, where he's supposed to be like a 1.6 ERA pitcher. Generally speaking, these ERA estimators never get as low as some of the best ERAs end up being. So, when we say there's regression baked in with some of these guys, of course there is, because they're just pitching out of their minds right now. And when we say Patrick Corbin isn't as bad as his statistics say, sure, but even his ERA estimators, if they were his actual ERA, would be the worst ERA in baseball for a qualified pitcher. So you're really just kind of, I don't know. I just have a hard time defending Patrick Corbin at this point, but I do see what you're saying.
I mean, a guy whose ERA is around 5 can be in the majors. He's just and even at that level, you still he's going to lose most of his starts, especially on the Nationals, but he's not like guaranteed to give up 6 runs a start like people sort of seem to think. Like, he should give up like 3 runs in 6 innings in a normal start.
That's fair. But I do think you get to a certain point, and we sort of saw this with a couple other very bad left-handed pitchers, older left-handed pitchers this season. Sometimes you just kind of lose it and it's gone. Speaking of just, weird things we talk ourselves into, Oakland A's stack. Can I get anyone behind this tonight? I mean, I know my favorite part of 2021 was picking on Kohei Arihara every single time he was taking the mound for the Texas Rangers. And, thankfully for the Rangers coaching staff and general management system, only made 10 starts last season before they finally pulled the plug. But we want to talk about ERA estimators. An expected ERA up over 8 last season. I know the Athletics are absolutely terrible, but we were sort of joking before the show started. They've been hitting a lot of home runs since the All-Star break. I mean, I'm not saying put 5 Athletics into a lineup, but Seth Brown, Sean Murphy, even if you want to use like Shea Langoliers at the bare minimum.
They have 5 min-price players in there.
I know.
5.
So if you're playing this stack, I think you have to play Sean Murphy because no one's going to do that.
It's going to be Langoliers, exactly.
Yeah, they're the same position. You can only play them at catcher. So I like the idea of the A's. I think Seth Brown for sure is underpriced. And yeah, it's just you got to have Murphy in there. He's the best hitter on the team and no one's going to play him. So Langoliers gets you the savings, but I mean, is he even a good hitter? Should we expect him to be good right away? I mean, his numbers in the minors were a little above average, but they're not great. Like I definitely would want Stevenson and Brown in the stack.
Yeah.
But I think I also want Murphy.
Yeah, Cal Stevenson, you know, I had said to Meiselman before the show, I was going to try and sell him on a Cal Stevenson stolen base prop, not realizing that it is one of the most one of the most bet props currently on the DraftKings Sportsbook.
It's only like 5-1, right? Like I was expecting
it was 7 when I checked it. It was 6-1, and now it's down to 5-1. So it's gotten a lot of action today.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're building 150 lineups, you have to throw in one 6-1 A stack. I mean, come on.
I agree.
Consecutive hitters priced at the minimum. I don't think I've ever seen that.
But you're missing their two best hitters in this lineup. I mean,
I think Sean Murphy's their best hitter. I mean, Sean Murphy's got a 153 WRC plus since July. He's been really,
right.
really
and
good.
then their second best hitter is Seth Brown.
Yeah.
So you don't have either of those guys here. I mean, it's really amusing to be able to stack 5-2 guys. I totally get it. That's like almost, but you can't even spend all the money if you do this.
Yeah, you're right. You can't.
It's like early days of KBO when all the players weren't exactly priced properly. You get a bunch of 2,000 guys in there.
Like Judge Ohtani.
Don't complete that lineup though, Matt. You take those guys out. But
cleared. Sorry.
Gotta leave some mystery for the peoples. But let's move over to the sports book. We were talking about some stolen base props. Well, I mean, I'll start with Meiselman. You don't have to give me a stolen base prop as your favorite bet of the day. But if you'd like to, you are more than welcome to.
You were not going to avoid it. I'm betting Starling Marte every single night for the rest of the season, but especially when he's facing the Braves or the Phillies. Because I'll just keep this short because this, again, basically my two things that I've said every day for the last 3 weeks are the NL East to win the World Series and Starling Marte to steal a base. And the Marte thing, really, he's a good base stealer when he wants to be, but he's been dealing as LaMarca. I'm sure you can like agree on this. Like he's got the groin injury, right? So that's somewhat of a concern that he doesn't want to run. But when he's facing the Braves and Phillies, the games matter more. And I think he's just pushing himself more in those games. He has 15 steals for the year. The last time the Mets faced Atlanta, which was last weekend, Marte stole 2 bases in the 3 games. And then in the Phillies series, he stole another one off Aaron Nola. So in those 6 games against divisional opponents, he had 3 steals. I think there's a very clear trend where when Marte is facing a weak opponent, he's not going to push himself. He doesn't want to burn out. He doesn't want to like re-hurt himself. But when he's facing, one of these teams where the games matter, I think he's way more aggressive. So I think 8-1's way too high. Like I think this line is double what it should be, and we're getting really insane value on it.
That's what I like to hear. LaMarca, you mentioned earlier that you had written up the Pirates money line as a possible bet tonight over on the DK playbook. I know you have a couple more bets in there because I edit these articles sometimes. So why don't you lay those out for the people?
Sure. Yeah, I have the Pirates. I do have the Metros tonight. There may be some slight bias there. I'm not going to lie, but the Mets have yet to lose a divisional series this season. There's something like 16-0-2 in division.
They're the anti-Red Sox.
They dropped game 1. Taijuan Walker, the last time he faced the Braves, was awful. I get it. There's so much working against the Mets right now, but I just can't help but believe in this team. And they've been the second best team this season on the money line. Only the Orioles have made bettors more money this season. I think that anytime you can get them as an underdog, you should consider doing so. They've kind of reached that point where even in a game where I don't think everything is in their favor, certainly their lineup is not as strong as it usually is. I like the idea of grabbing them as pretty sizable underdogs.
Before we move on from this game, can we look at Charlie Morton's strikeout prop too? I actually don't disagree. Like I think the Mets are a reasonable bet. I like the Marte prop, but I also think we have to look at this Morton strikeout number. Because even if the Mets win, I think they're going to strike out a lot tonight.
So you like I don't know if I want to lay minus 155. There should be some easy strikeouts at the end of that lineup.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying.
What I don't like is that the Mets drive pitch counts to the moon for their opposing starters. The last time they played the Braves, they didn't have a starter make it out of make it more than 5 innings. So it's possible that Morton can get 6 in less than 6 innings of work. But this Mets lineup, for the most part, has been pretty strikeout averse this season. I think it's a good number. I think that I would lean towards the over. I just don't love the juice on it.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I mean, and if we had 6.5 with like plus 130 instead, like I'd be more interested in that, but I still think like Morton should be able to get 6 or 7 strikeouts tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you
with
can
the
also
vast majority of the time.
you can cook up a little SGP, throw a little Marte Steele, maybe an alternate strikeout prop on Charlie Martin.
Yeah, what kind of odds do we get on that? What are we looking at if we combine those two things?
Let's see. So we are going to go with Charlie Morton. We want 7+ strikeouts.
Yeah, let's do the 7+.
And we want.
I actually know it. We tried this once before. Can you do the steals in the same game parlay? Because
hell yeah,
you know what?
I think they have limited options, but
it was also you couldn't bet the over. You couldn't bet the under because we were trying to go unders on stolen bases a couple weeks ago when Syndergaard got traded.
That's the answer. But you're getting 19-1. It looks like
not bad. Not bad.
I think it's a reasonable bet. These are my 2 favorite bets in the game. I don't hate the Mets money line either, but I don't think I would combine all 3 of those.
Yeah,
that's a very narrow band of things to happen to hit all of that with the Mets still winning. But yeah, those are 2 of my like 6 or 7 favorite bets tonight. So I don't have a problem combining them.
Well, you mentioned 6 or 7 favorite bets, Meiselman. I know you just wrote up a hilarious parlay that hit last night on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Where one bettor put a money line parlay down on every single game that took place last night. I'm not asking for one of those types of parlays. And obviously we just went through the same game parlay with the Mets, but is there any parlay that's catching your eyes tonight, guys?
I mean, I think that's it, but I guess I'll just reiterate, like, I really like the over in that Chicago game. Honestly, I sort of like when you guys were talking about the Cardinals offense, part of me was agreeing there, and part of me is like, this team is just overvalued, and I just don't think Kyle Freeland's that bad. So yes, they're quite good against lefties, but Freeland's numbers look so awful because of Coors Field, and he's not that bad of a pitcher. Like, he's an average pitcher. So I'm sort of looking like, I think I'd parlay, maybe you go like Rocky's run line with the under. There is something to be said for, I'm curious if we can actually get this to work. Yeah, so that looks pretty good to me because when I'll try to like not get into the math of this too much, but under 7.5 correlates well with plus 1.5 because of the outcomes where you get a 3-3 game in the bottom of the 9th and the Cardinals can't score multiple runs in the inning without a home run. So when the home team wins, it's more likely to only be by 1. Like, you want to lay run lines of 1.5 or take the run line at plus 1.5. More so with a road team because the home team needs a home run at the end to be able to like push the game past the run line in extra innings. So when you like do the math of that, it looks better. So I'll just like leave it at that without actually like going through calculations. But these 2 bets are reasonably well correlated. So if you like the Cardinals offense tonight, like, this isn't your bet, but and I know this is only a 2-leg parlay, but I actually really do like combining those 2 things.
LaMarca, you got anything you like that you haven't mentioned yet before we wrap up?
I'm going to continue to pick on the Yankees offensive futility. So, again, we've talked about the injuries that they have. Jeffrey Springs, to me, has been super underrated for most of the year. I mean, he started out as like an opener, and now he's morphed into more of a traditional starting pitcher, and he's got a 2.56 ERA. He's definitely been a little bit lucky, but his xERA, his leading indicators all suggest that he's been a pretty good pitcher. And the Yankees have 8 runs total in their last 6 games. So if you wanted to do something like Tampa Bay money line and then a Yankees team total under, that's something I could get behind as a parlay.
I do know when seeing the lineups come in today, Jose Trevino as a 5-hitter was a jarring experience. So we are clearly not getting the Yankees that you're really thinking about. Maybe if you haven't paid attention the last couple of weeks. With that,
Josh Donaldson and his like 190 batting average is a cleanup hitter.
Yeah, it's not exceedingly pretty right now for the Yankees. Obviously, Benintendi left on left in the 6th spot. It's not ideal. So I could definitely get behind some under action in that particular contest. All right, gents. I know we got off to a bit of a rocky start. We had some tech issues, but I think we pulled through. We got the people all the information they needed. So for Matt Meiselman, for Matt LaMarca, I am Gary Thorne. That'll wrap up today's edition of the Slate. Want to remind you guys that because we still have a full hour till this baseball actually starts and you're going to need to kill some time, stay tuned In Simland, we've got Madden, Rams at Bears coming up next. We will see you guys tomorrow.